This edition of Mac Voices is sponsored by lynda.com, the unparalleled online video training library. For a free 10-day unlimited trial, visit lynda.com/macvoices. And by Mac Voices Magazine, our free Flipboard magazine that brings you some of the best Mac, iPhone, and iPad productivity tips on the web. High in signal, low in noise, just like Mac Voices, Mac Voices Magazine includes information on how you can get more out of your Apple technology. Subscribe at macvoices.com/magazine or search for Mac Voices Magazine on Flipboard. Welcome to Mac Voices. This is the Talk of the Mac community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, I'm really excited about this particular show because it means that I get to welcome back not only an old friend, but also one of my top essential utilities to actual release status and working status. And that's Default Folder by St. Clair Software. And I've got Jon Gotow on the line with us to tell us all about it. Jon, it's great to have you back on Mac Voices. It's been an awful long time.
It has been. It's good to be back.
Yeah. And you don't look like you have any more gray hairs or anything after all this. So.
Yeah, it's been a little bit of hair pulling lately, but not doing too badly now.
Well, everyone knows that I say that there are a few utilities that I just think are essential for any Mac user, and Default Folder is one of them. And when we moved to El Capitan, of course, it broke Default Folder in a big way.
Right.
So you've been busy working on that. And so I'd like to just take it from the top and work us the whole way through the story of where it's been and where we are now. But let's start at the very basic part. For the people who might not be familiar with it, there might be one or two out there. What is Default Folder?
Well, Default Folder is a utility that makes it quicker to get around in your open and save dialogues. Everybody's usually familiar with at least a save dialog. When you hit Save As and go to save a document, you get a little dialog box that prompts you for the name of the file that you want to save and where you want to put it. And if you organize your files, if you save everything on the desktop, it doesn't really matter. But if you organize your files, you usually have things in folders and subfolders in different places on your machine. And getting back and forth between folders can be a painstaking process sometimes, depending on how you have things nested, where you have things stored. And remembering where you put things is quite a challenge. So what Default Folder does is makes it much easier and faster to get to different folders on your hard drive, to save things where you want them and to go back to where you were. In doing that, it lets you set up favorite folders. It lets you go back to folders that you used recently. So if you, for example, are saving something in Word and you just, you hit close the window, it says, do you want to save it? You say save and hit return, and it saved it somewhere. You can go back to your recent folders list in Default Folder and see where you actually were, and return there easily. In addition, it offers all of the same features in the Finder, so that if you're in a file dialog and doing something and want to open that same folder in the Finder to do more organization, move things around, you can do that directly from the Recent Folders menu in your menu bar. There are also a number of quick shortcut features that a lot of people use. One of the most popular is a thing called Finder Click, where if you've got windows open on your desktop in the Finder, showing folders, for example, that you're working with files in, when a save dialog comes up, you can actually just click on that folder and have the save dialog go to the same place, which saves people a lot of time, because normally, if you have something open in the Finder that you've been moving files around with, that's usually where you're saving all your stuff. And so clicking there directly in a file dialog makes things go a lot quicker. And then there's the name of the product itself, Default Folder. It does allow you to set up a default folder for any application, so that the first time that you hit open or save, you're already in the folder where all of your work stuff already is. So that's sort of the basics. There are a whole lot of miscellaneous little features to customize it. Again, to save you time, you can set shortcuts for all of your favorite folders and go back to your recent folders using a shortcut, things like that. So especially for people that do a lot of file management, file handling, got a lot of graphic artists and people like that are big fans and use it all the time. And so that's sort of default folder in a nutshell. It's hard to describe. It's easier, once you use it a few times, to understand what it does and how much time it'll save you. So generally, I encourage people just to go try it. It comes with a 30-day free trial and all that stuff. We don't do the Mac App Store thing.
Right. And I have to say, default folder was one of the reasons I hesitated to move to El Capitan, because I didn't want to lose it. And then I felt the pressure to do that so I could talk about El Capitan and have some experience with it. And it was more painful than I expected from the standpoint of losing default folder, because all of a sudden I had to find myself, navigating through folders here and there and back and forth instead of using some of the shortcuts and some of the features. And so when I saw it come out in a public beta, it's like, oh, I'm delighted, because now I don't care if it breaks a few times. If it's a public beta, it's got to be reasonably stable. And I have to say, I've had no trouble with the public beta at all. It brought back so much of my productivity.
Yeah, I've gotten that from a lot of people. It's unfortunate that it took as long as it did to get it finished for El Capitan. It was a lot more challenging than I expected. And I've been working on the new version since last year, actually, and had to kind of kick it into high gear when suddenly, in the middle of beta testing El Capitan, Apple turned on system integrity protection. And all of a sudden it's kind of like, now it doesn't work at all. That's a problem.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, because that was, I think, a big blow to you and to a lot of other utilities. System integrity protection basically meant that you had to, I'm not sure, did you have to do a complete rewrite, or did you have to find ways around it, or?
It ended up, in my case, being more sensible to do a complete rewrite, because so much of the way default folder 4 worked, 4 being the old version, depended on not having system integrity protection there. System integrity protection is a good thing, and I don't fault Apple for adding it as a feature to the OS. It will help with stability. It does help secure the OS, both from malicious people and from just things that break or users doing things they really shouldn't. And so it's a good measure. But yeah, default folder used to load a plugin into all applications, and that's how it figured out whether a file dialog was going to come up. Was basically, it had a little plugin in there and it watched internally in the application. Okay, this stuff is happening. I need to get set up and put up all the controls and things like that. And with system integrity protection, that plugin method didn't work anymore. And so I had to really re-engineer things entirely.
That's interesting. In the times we've talked before, in all my time of using default folder, I don't think I understood the mechanics of how it worked. I sort of assumed that it worked maybe more at a system level, that anytime an open or saved dialog was invoked, there would be some sort of intercept or redirect there, as opposed to being inside an application.
Well, essentially what it did, there are two parts to the default folder. There's the application itself, which does all of the menuing and all of the, basically the heavy lifting, all the base functionality is in a separate background application that's just running to the side. But there are a bunch of things, as you point out. It needs notifications, essentially, of when a file dialog is coming up, when all the standard system routines are happening. And the way that default folder and a bunch of other utilities worked up until system integrity protection came along was that they would inject code a plugin basically into an application, and then they could see when that application called the system routines. For example, when Microsoft Word invokes the NS Save panel, which is the underlying operating system service that does save panels, default folder could intercept that, and basically all it did was say, "Oh, it's happening." It didn't actually do a whole lot, but it was just all the signaling that was necessary to tell the background application, "Hey, get ready. Here's where the file dialog is on the screen. This is the folder it's pointing at. This is what's selected." Things like that. And so the background application part was fine, but all of the signaling, all of the state handling for the file dialogs that happened within the application is no longer possible in Capitan. And so that had to change. And in the process, the background application, the guts of default folder, have been around for quite a while. And given that I had to change all the communication and everything else out of it, it was a good opportunity to sort of rewrite everything.
Today's Mac Voices is sponsored by lynda.com, the unparalleled online video training library. Get a free full 10-day trial at lynda.com/macvoices. If you're interested in learning or in acquiring new skills or advancing the skills you already have, there's a lot to like about lynda.com. Lots of little things, but this time, let's focus on some of my favorite big things. First, the breadth of training available. 4,100 plus courses in audio and music, 3D and animation, education, design, business, and a whole lot more. Second, the depth of training. It's rare that you'll only find 1 or 2 courses on any given subject. Sure, if the subject or program is new, but for topics like design or video, there are over 500 courses to choose from. So you aren't going to just scratch the surface, you're going to take a deep dive into whatever you need or want to know about. Third, the instructors. These aren't just talking heads or narrators, but are actual experts in their fields, people who live and breathe their areas of expertise. That makes a big difference since they know what to teach and how best to present it. No one reads from the manual. They take you through the steps on the path to understanding. Fourth, the constant updates and additions to the lynda.com library. Lynda.com is constantly adding new courses in current and new topics. Every month, sometimes every week, a few more get added to the collection, so that everything I said about their library is not only true today, but it will be true tomorrow, next week, and next year. Fifth, the convenience. With the lynda.com iOS apps, I can take lynda.com anywhere, anytime, online or offline, learning where and when it suits me on my schedule, not someone else's. And if you have an annual premium membership, you can even download and view lynda.com courses offline on your desktop or laptop. Sixth, the price. For a single, affordable fee, I have access to everything lynda.com has to offer. No tiers, no special levels, everything. Legacy content, new content, videos, instruction pieces, the iOS apps, monthly magazine-type shows, and much, much more. Seventh is the fact that you can try it all out for yourself right now by visiting lynda.com/macvoices. When you do, you get a free, full 10 days of access to the entire lynda.com collection. If you can stay awake that long, that's 240 hours of training just waiting for you to try. Your biggest problem during those 10 days is going to be trying to decide what to watch first. Once you subscribe full time, well, you're probably still going to have that same problem, since there's so much great information on lynda.com. That's lynda.com/macvoices for a free, full 10-day trial. Do it now and learn something new and useful today. Thanks to lynda.com for their ongoing support of Mac Voices. Really interesting that you can do it, because in a simpler time, a number of years ago, all of that made perfect sense. But now you can completely see why having one application inject itself into another one is probably not a good idea.
It's not a good idea. Security-wise, it wasn't the best thing. applications like default folder, if they were, if they wanted to do something malicious, could. And that, is a perfectly valid concern. And if they weren't written well, they could cause stability problems. So system integrity protection makes sense. And, I'm partly just fortunate that I can still implement default folder without that plugin method. I mean, there are some other utilities like, what's it called? Extra Finder. And what was the other one? Escapes my mind now. Binary Software's, I forget the name of it.
That's another interesting point, that you've been able to find a way around this, or to, even though it required a rewrite, so that you bring all these features back to us. Is there any feature that hasn't been able to be brought back?
There are a few things. One of the more recent additions to default folder 4 was that it would expand the edit box in save dialogs, because it's really fairly small, and if you want to type a long file name, it ends up not fitting and scrolling around on you. That particular feature is something I can't do anymore, because I don't have any way to modify something inside the application. And so there are a few things like that I haven't been able to do, and that's unfortunate, but sort of the price you pay. Wish I could. But again, that's one of those nice but not necessary things. Right.
So,
exactly.
And we'll take the necessary all the time.
Yeah, we haven't really lost any major functionality, which is very surprising, actually, that I've managed to. Well, honestly, when all of this started back in 2014, I sort of did a proof of concept for myself, because I really wasn't sure whether any of this was possible. I knew something like system integrity protection was coming. And so I was kind of like, okay, I need to figure out exactly what I can do here, because this is gonna happen eventually. I'm gonna have to rewrite this, and let's see if we can actually make it work. Because I didn't want to promise something I couldn't do. There are what Apple calls accessibility features in OS X that allow you to see what's on the screen and interact with things in restricted ways. And so it was really a matter of delving into that API and finding out whether it had enough support for things for me to actually access everything and do everything. And there are some things in default folder 5 that I wish I could make work faster, because accessibility is inherently slower than having basically unfettered access to everything in the application. And so there are some little lags and things in default folder 5 that I'm still trying to make work faster. But by and large, through some creative engineering, I've been able to put most of the stuff, like I said, almost all the features back. So.
Yeah, and it's funny now, because I've gone in that gap without having default folder, and so honestly, I'd forgotten about the wider dialogues. So there may be some things that I either haven't encountered yet, or just I got out of the habit, and therefore I didn't miss them as much. But just the idea of having my frequently used folders back, my favorites back, the most recent folders back, all of those things are just, in some ways, I'm surprised that Apple hasn't done a little more with the Open and Safe dialogues themselves, but I'm glad they haven't. Yeah,
I hear that a lot. I can't count the number of times that I've gotten, an email or a tweet or something from somebody saying, "Why hasn't Apple added all this stuff?" Like you said, I'm on one hand glad they haven't, because it's a good product niche for me. But I think it's, perhaps it isn't for everybody. Though I really can't see why they wouldn't add this stuff, honestly. It makes things much more convenient, much faster. I suppose it adds some complexity to the file dialogues for new users. If you haven't used a computer, if you're not a savvy user, I suppose it could add some additional confusion, but to me it seems merited. But yeah, to each his own, right?
Well, to each their own, but that's just it, and that's one of the reasons the default folder, I think, is one of those I can recommend to anyone and say, this, if everyone uses open and save dialogues, and this just makes them better. It makes them smarter. It makes them easier to navigate around in. So why wouldn't you do this unless you just absolutely surf the web and use email and that's all you ever do with your Mac?
There are people that do that.
Yeah, there are a few. None that listen to this show, but yeah, there's some.
Right, exactly. And so, yeah, that's the thing, is your listenership, viewership is probably at a little higher level than some of the casual users that surf the web, answer email, play a few games. That's about it. And and then they suffer through saving things when they do, but they don't do it as often as some other people. But default folder, a lot of those features really should be part of the OS. I mean, it makes sense. They work pretty fluidly. It's not like they're, an oddball thing. So anyway.
So what, and we're recording this a little bit ahead of time, but what is this current state of default folder, and what do you hope it to be by the time we release this?
It's basically in final beta testing. There are some miscellaneous little bugs I'm cleaning up, but I've got thousands of people out there using it now, and I've gotten 2 bug reports in this last build. So
wow.
we're pretty good. It's really a matter just of making sure that the upgrade process is seamless, that importing all the old preferences works and there's no quirks in there. Basically just sort of giving it a wide audience and making sure that there aren't any quirky little things that are going to trip people up. So I'm hoping to have everything out. I'm actually having it released next week. And, barring any major huge discoveries or anything like that, it looks like everything's on track and should be good to go.
And so, and next week, this time will be, folks, will be
beginning of January.
Current your week now. So if you see this, it either should be live or should be going live any second now. And it's one that I can't stress enough. Jon, you did mention, though, that you don't do the App Store thing. Let's talk about the pricing and the upgrades for this. How are you handling that?
I'm sticking with the existing pricing for this release. It's basically the same as version 4. It's $34.95 new, $14.95 for upgrades. If someone has purchased a license, either an upgrade or a new copy, since June 1st of 2015, the upgrade's free. The software basically checks with the server to see when you bought your copy and will accept your serial number as is if you bought it since June 1st. And otherwise, we'll put up a little prompt that says, you need to purchase an upgrade and send you to the right place and hopefully get everything seamlessly working. So far, haven't had too many troubles.
Are you a per user license or per machine license?
It's per user. So if somebody's got multiple computers, if you've got your MacBook Pro that you carry around and your MacBook Air that you take on trips and your Mac Pro at home, if you're just one user, you just need one license.
Because I just got the upgrade notice for the beta last night, and the process was seamless. I'd had no trouble at all. So, and folks, I tell you, I've paid for this software. It's well worth it. The number of times you will use it, I can't stress that enough. Jon, is the fact that default folder, the way you would have implemented it in the past, obviously would have disqualified you for the App Store. Right. Could you be in the App Store if you wanted to at this point, or is that a choice you've made that it's better just to go straight to you?
It still would not be allowed in the App Store because it uses accessibility features, which requires that you go to System Preferences and type in your password. And Apple basically won't allow anything in the App Store that requires the user to type their administrative password. Even though what it's doing now is actually, the only thing you have to enter your password for is to give default folder access to the accessibility features. But that's something that OS X actually keeps password protected. So even though default folder isn't asking for your password directly, the system has to in order to get it running.
Right. Okay.
So yes, no App Store, though. I'm honestly not a huge fan of the App Store myself anyway.
Yeah, that's a whole discussion we could have separately about
Yeah.
The fact that there are a lot of developers right now that are finding the App Store challenging, and in some cases leaving the App Store, which it's unfortunate, I think, for everyone, but it's just the way it is.
Yeah, it is unfortunate. I think it's, if Apple, allowed us as developers, number one, to sell upgrades, and number two, was a little easier on some of the restrictions, I think it would be a much more attractive platform for developers. But yeah, as it stands now, it's difficult. The approval process is slow. And there are a lot of restrictions that keep us from offering features that we would otherwise be able to give people. So especially for default folder, outside the App Store makes a lot more sense.
And it's easy for me to sit here and advocate your position because you have a well-established reputation in the community, a long-time developer, and so naturally I would say that default folders should be allowed to do some things that other newer untested developers and untested apps shouldn't be allowed to do. But that's not the way it works, and I can understand Apple's position too about why they can't do that.
Right. It would make the approval process even harder and slower for them. They've got to deal with a lot of apps, a lot of people, and they've got to deal with a broad spectrum of users on the other side, and so they've got to do what makes sense for their business model and for the massive number of users that they've got walking around in the App Store. Yeah. It is what it is. Business trade-offs, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know about you, but I can't fault Apple a great deal for having locked down the OS with all the bad guys out there that are out, and the audience that they are trying to cultivate. They're trying to turn this into a simpler and simpler machine, which is great. And that means that you're trying to protect people from themselves and their own gullibility. Right. And, how many people do we both know that have clicked on apps that say, call this number because we think you have a virus, and they call and give them a credit card. It's scary.
One of my relatives got caught by that. I was
really
surprised. Yeah, like, no, you shouldn't do that. But you're right. The safer we can make it for everybody, the better. Really, it does make developers jump through hoops a bit more, and it does. There's a fine balance there because I don't like as a developer having to limit functionality because of it. System integrity protection was a hard one for me because it does limit, it's one thing to have the App Store and being able to sell in the App Store, you have to limit yourself. But previously, being outside the App Store, you could do, pretty much whatever you wanted. System integrity protection has made some things more challenging and does limit users' options some, which I'm not really a fan of. But in this case, I understand the need for it.
And to put a bottom line on this, to make sure that we understand, by running default folder, we do not have to turn off system integrity protection.
Nope. It runs on the base system just the way it is. Yeah. Version 4, if you wanted to run it on Capitan, you had to turn off system integrity protection. Version 5 will run with the system straight out of the box.
Right. So we're not asking anyone to compromise any of the protection Apple is putting in place.
Right. Exactly. And that's the point.
Great. Give us a quick rundown on everything else that St. Clair offers, so that we because obviously default folder is a flagship, but what else is going with you?
App Tamer, which is a application that stops or slows down background applications. If you've ever had, one of those apps running in the background that all of a sudden the fans come on your Mac, and you're sitting there going, I'm not doing anything. Why is everything suddenly getting all noisy. And there's an application in the background that's suddenly using up 100% of one CPU for some reason or another. App Tamer is designed to keep those sorts of things under control. If you've got an app or web browser, Google Chrome in particular, that sucks down a lot more CPU than perhaps it should or you would want it to, you can set it up so that while you're not actively using it, App Tamer throttles it down or stops it completely to keep it from using up CPU, kicking up your fans, things like that. Another product, Jettison, is a very, simple conceptually application that just ejects external disks when you put your Mac to sleep. I don't know how many people have encountered the disk not ejected properly warning if you just yank the plug on your drive or something. But Jettison is designed to get rid of that problem, so that you close the lid on your laptop to go somewhere and you left the backup drive plugged in. Jettison will eject it for you, so that when you unplug the backup drive and then open the machine back up again, it won't say, "Oh no."
Yeah.
So Jettison, and that one is available through the App Store. And the last one is HistoryHound, which is a application that I wrote quite a few years ago and have been keeping current because it scratches an itch that I myself have, in that what it does is looks at your browser history and makes a search index, so that instead of using Google to find something, you can just you can search through just the things that you've actually visited in your web browser. So if you, for example, found a great recipe for, honey glazed ham, and didn't remember to bookmark it, you can search in your browsing history and find that particular recipe, rather than trying to Google it and finding the 7 gazillion recipes for honey baked ham and trying to sort through the one that you actually wanted to find. So yeah, that one is just, as we get older, our memories get a little bit worse. And that was one of those things where, yeah, I kind of need this now because I can't remember everything I've browsed.
Well, not only that, but we all are browsing more and more stuff, and unfortunately, you're right. You think of something 3 days later, it's like, where did I see that? I remember seeing something about that.
Exactly. Yeah, and the impetus from it came from my son came in and asked a question, and I was like, oh, I saw something about that just 3 days ago. I started looking through my browser history, and I couldn't find it. It's kind of like it's back in there somewhere, but I don't remember the title of the page or what site it was on. And so, yeah, I wrote a quick and dirty search engine to do that just for myself, and that sort of took a life of its own, as these things do, and ended up as a product. And so, yeah, so those are the 4 things: default folder, App Tamer, Jettison, and HistoryHound. And
they're all current for El Capitan?
Yes.
Great. Jon, I can't tell you how delighted I am to have you back and to have default folder back for lots of reasons, but not the least of which is just simple productivity. And this has been a good discussion. Hopefully it gives people a little more insight into some of the challenges you face as a developer trying to bring some of this cool software to us and still abide by the security guidelines of the modern world.
It can be a challenge, but yeah, it's fun, and I'm happy to have it back too. There was a very short period of time when I didn't have it either, and it was driving me absolutely crazy. The development process, it was kind of funny because some of the beta testers were like, why did you implement this first? It's kind of like, because I use it a lot.
You're allowed.
Like, these are Jon's features.
Yeah, you're allowed.
And then we'll finish the rest of it.
Sure, it's your product. You're allowed to implement what you want in your own order.
But it was kind of amusing because there were different features that were sort of put into a level that I needed to make certain things work, and then all the features that I used were all completely finished and polished. And then yeah, we got to the rest of it.
Well, I hope you'll come back as the programs develop, and maybe, who knows, you may add something else to the stable. We'd love to see it.
Yep. There are actually a couple of things still in the investigative stages, but yeah, some possibilities out there too. Now the default folder's back up and running.
Well, standing invitation. Anytime you have anything, we'd love to hear from you.
Appreciate it, Chuck.
All right. It's good to see you. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is Mac Voices. Once again, I can't stress enough, go and try Default Folder, especially now that the new version is out and you've got 30 days to try it. I think at the end of 30 days, you're going to find that you really miss it if you don't get it. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and the Mac Voices blog. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the Mac Voices Dispatch, to stay up to date on all the latest Mac Voices news from our front page or at macvoices.com/newsletter. Do more with your Apple tech by subscribing to the free Mac Voices magazine on Flipboard by visiting macvoices.com/magazine. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.